Under the scorching sun of the Arizona desert, the town of Blackridge appeared dry and worn out, a place long accustomed to loss and despair. Red dust swirled along the main road as a lone rider on a gray horse emerged from the distance, his quiet demeanor carrying an unmistakable air of danger. A dark cloak fluttered lightly in the hot wind, and the two pistols hanging low at his hips made it clear he was no ordinary traveler. When he reined in his horse in front of Jake Henshaw's general store, suspicious eyes immediately turned toward him. In Blackridge, a stranger always meant trouble. The rider dismounted with calm composure and spoke in a low, polite voice, asking only for a meal and a place to stay for the night. Yet the gold coin he set on the counter and the cold confidence in his gaze told Jake that this man carried more than a simple need for shelter. From across the street, Sheriff Gideon Nash watched in silence, sensing that the arrival of this stranger would stir the already troubled waters of Blackridge. A wheel of fate had begun to turn, and the town was about to lose what little peace it had left. Blackridge was harsh not only because of its climate, but also because of the iron grip of Silas Granger, the man who held all the power in town. He owned most of the land, controlled the water supply, and twisted the law into a tool for his own gain. In this place, no one dared to stand against Granger, because the price was always the same: homes burned to the ground, livestock slaughtered, or worse, a death no one dared to speak of. Sheriff Gideon Nash, a man who should have upheld justice, had instead become Granger's right-hand enforcer. Under the guise of keeping order, Nash and his thugs were quick to crush anyone who showed the slightest hint of defiance. Complaints vanished before they were ever voiced, while fear quietly seeped into every dusty street of Blackridge. The townsfolk lived in resignation, learning to bow their heads just to survive. Saloons, shops, farms, everything operated beneath the dark shadow of tyranny. Blackridge slowly lost its soul, becoming a town that breathed nothing but fear. And it was in this very atmosphere that the arrival of the mysterious rider felt all the more suspicious, like a small spark capable of igniting a catastrophe no one dared to imagine. At the Silver Sage Inn, the once lively atmosphere suddenly grew heavy when the mysterious rider began asking questions about Silas Granger. Eleanor Parsons, the innkeeper, immediately sensed the danger behind those seemingly casual inquiries. In Blackridge, speaking Granger's name was no different from inviting disaster, and the man standing before her clearly understood that, yet chose to press on anyway. When Eleanor asked about his true purpose, the stranger's eyes darkened for a brief moment, as if drawn back to a distant, painful memory. He didn't explain much, only saying that there was an unpaid debt between him and Granger. That short answer alone was enough to send a chill down Eleanor's spine. The tension thickened when Sheriff Gideon Nash arrived, bringing with him his familiar air of menace. He warned the stranger that Blackridge was no place to ask the wrong questions. In response, the rider calmly asked Nash to deliver a simple message to Granger: "Tell him that Caleb Shaw has returned." The instant that name was spoken, Nash's face went pale. His confidence drained away, replaced by fear he could not hide. Caleb Shaw, a name believed to have died 15 years ago, now echoed like a warning bell for the storm about to break over Blackridge. Caleb Shaw was no nameless drifter. 15 years ago, he was a boy living on the farm of Jacob Shaw, a man who dared to stand up to Silas Granger and refused to give up his land. The price was swift and merciless. On a moonless night, Granger's men set the farm ablaze, slaughtered the livestock, reduced the home to ashes, and left the Shaw family trapped in a sea of fire. Jacob Shaw died that night. For 15 years of wandering, he carried with him the memory of his mother's desperate screams, the flames consuming everything he loved, and the helplessness of a child unable to protect his family. That pain did not kill Caleb. It forged him into someone else, colder, more patient, and driven by a single purpose. Now, Caleb has returned to the place that took everything from him, not to seek refuge, but to settle a blood debt buried for 15 long years. Blackridge is not just his past, it is the reckoning he must face in order to move forward. What do you think helped Caleb survive and endure those 15 years? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. To confront Silas Granger, Caleb knew that hatred alone would never be enough. Acting on Eleanor's advice, he left Blackridge at dawn, riding across the barren land toward a small ranch near Cottonwood Creek. It belonged to Lucas Tanner, an old friend of his father's, and one of the few men still quietly resisting Granger. Their first meeting was tense. Tanner leveled his gun at Caleb, but the moment he heard the name Shaw, suspicion gave way to shock and hope. He had long believed that Jacob Shaw's son was dead. Seeing Caleb standing before him was a stark reminder that justice had not been completely buried. Inside the modest wooden house, Tanner recounted how Granger had gradually turned Blackridge into his personal domain, using violence and fear to silence anyone who dared oppose him. He also revealed a crucial truth. Granger had only one weakness, his daughter, Abigail, who was nothing like her father. Caleb listened in silence. The thought of involving an innocent person made him hesitate, yet he understood that if he wanted to drag Granger into the light, he would need more than a gun. The meeting with Tanner marked a turning point. No longer a lone man returning from the past, Caleb now had allies and a clearer path forward. Knowing Silas Granger's weakness, Caleb found himself facing a painful choice. A direct confrontation with guns was the familiar path, but also the quickest way to a meaningless death. If he truly wanted to end Granger's power, he had to take the more dangerous route, getting close to Abigail Granger, the only innocent person tied to the greatest enemy of his life. Caleb had no desire to involve a woman who had never had a hand in any crime. His hesitation stretched through the night as he sat alone in his rented room, watching darkness slowly swallow the town of Blackridge. But memories of his family burned alive, and of countless others crushed under Granger's rule, finally forced him to decide. When night fell over the Granger estate, Caleb moved in silence. He slipped past the armed guards, climbed in through an upper window, and entered the house like a ghost. This was no longer a gunfight, it was a deadly game of strategy, where a single mistake could bring everything crashing down. Caleb understood one thing clearly. From the moment he stepped into that house, there was no turning back. His decision to approach Abigail threatened not only his life, but also the fragile line between justice and wrongdoing, a line he had struggled to hold onto for 15 years. The encounter between Caleb and Abigail Granger unfolded in the tense silence of a room lit by oil lamps. Contrary to what Caleb had imagined, Abigail did not panic or cry out. In her weary eyes was a mix of understanding and deep sorrow, as if her father's crimes had long been a burden she had carried alone. When Caleb spoke the truth about his destroyed family, Abigail did not deny it. She admitted that she had watched Blackridge rot day by day, seen her father buy off the law, seize land, and turn fear into a tool of rule. Her long silence was not approval, but helplessness. After a fierce inner struggle, Abigail made a bold decision. She revealed the existence of a ledger hidden in Granger's study, one that recorded every illegal deal, every bribe, and the names of those he had ruined. It was evidence powerful enough to end everything. In that moment, Caleb realized this was more than a simple bargain. For the first time, he felt he was no longer alone in this fight. In the darkness of the Granger estate, a fragile spark of justice began to form, lit by the courage of a daughter willing to stand against her own blood. Caleb had barely left the Granger estate when gunshots ripped through the quiet night of Blackridge. Panicked screams echoed from the distance, sending a chill through his veins. The direction of the noise was no accident, it was Lucas Tanner's ranch. Granger had struck first, just as he always did, attacking before his enemies had a chance to prepare. By the time Caleb rode in, the ranch was already engulfed in flames. The barns burned fiercely, livestock fled in terror, and beneath the red glow of firelight, Granger's men alongside Sheriff Nash's deputies advanced like an army, firing without mercy. Tanner stood amid the wreckage, gun in hand, determined to defend the last of his land with his life. Without hesitation, Caleb plunged into the fight. His shots were fast, precise, and cold, forcing the attackers to retreat in chaos. The fire still raged, but the balance had shifted. This assault was no longer a silent warning, it was an open declaration of war. Amid the blazing inferno and the stench of gunpowder, Caleb understood one thing clearly. The path back had burned away with Tanner's ranch. From this moment on, the confrontation with Silas Granger could no longer be delayed. The night of fire and blood had begun the final chapter, one that could no longer be avoided. Under the cold moonlight, Caleb and Lucas Tanner marched straight toward Silas Granger's estate. This time, they did not go alone. The people of Blackridge, men and women who had lived in fear for years, rose up, carrying torches and crude weapons, forming a silent yet determined force. Years of submission had finally turned into resistance. Sheriff Nash tried to stop them with what little authority he had left, but faced with the will of the crowd, his confidence quickly collapsed. Guns were lowered, one by one. For the first time in many years, Blackridge chose to stand on the side of justice. On the steps of the estate, Caleb confronted Silas Granger face to face. The gunfight was swift and brutal. Caleb was wounded, but his shot brought Granger down. Instead of finishing his enemy, Caleb chose to stop. He forced Granger to surrender, allowing him to live and face his crimes before the law and the people. When Abigail appeared, holding her dying father in her arms, the hatred within Caleb slowly ebbed away. The confrontation ended not with death, but with a far harder choice, returning justice to Blackridge itself. Dawn rose over Blackridge like a new beginning. Silas Granger and his accomplices were arrested, and the ledger was brought into the light, exposing years of buried crimes. A town that had lived in fear began to breathe again, as justice was no longer an empty word, but a living reality. Caleb Shaw did not stay to accept thanks or claim the title of hero. When it was over, he quietly prepared to leave, just as he had arrived. Eleanor and the people of Blackridge saw him off in silence, their eyes filled with deep gratitude. Lucas Tanner and Abigail Granger remained behind, taking on the task of rebuilding the town and healing old wounds. Before mounting his horse, Caleb looked back at Blackridge one last time. What had once been a nightmare had become proof that evil could be defeated not only with guns, but with courage and the right choices. He turned away and rode toward the open horizon, carrying with him a past finally laid to rest. From that day on, the name Caleb Shaw became a whisper in the wind, a legend of a rider who came from nowhere, set things right, and vanished, leaving behind the belief that justice always has a chance to survive, as long as someone is willing to stand up and defend it.